My boyfriend cheated on me during quarantine. In April of last year, while we're in the middle of lockdown, I, 26F, found out that my boyfriend, 27M, of 2 years was cheating on me for over a month with a local girl he met through Tinder. They have never met obviously due to COVID, but reading the messages between them was so disgusting and heartbreaking. It felt like I didn't know him at all. I only found out because I had to borrow his phone because mine died and I needed to make an important call. While I was reading the messages, I felt my stomach turn, I became dizzy, and worse, I suddenly felt a piercing pain through my heart. I felt as if my life was being shattered in front of me and I couldn't do anything but watch. I have never felt anything like that in my life, and I didn't know what to do. I was angry, sad, broken, hurt, betrayed. I felt everything at once. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I took screenshots and sent them to my phone. When I came home an hour later, the first thing I asked him when I opened the door was, "Do you still love me?" in a very sweet tone, pretending to be sweet and shit, and he was like, "Of course, baby. More than anything in this world." So then I responded to him by saying, "Then why are you cheating on me?" His face turned white, and he was denying it for the first 10 seconds. Then when I told him I read everything, he was speechless. He was apologizing profusely. I broke up with him after that conversation. The thing is, this was during lockdown, and we lived together somewhere in Asia. We couldn't go anywhere. Hotels were closed. Going to our friends' houses was impossible. We were stuck with each other. It was the worst time of my life. I told him we could stay in our flat until the restrictions are lifted and then he can move out. He agreed. By the way, it was his birthday the day after I found out he was cheating on me. And of course, as his girlfriend, I ordered food and little decorations to celebrate his birthday weeks prior. I decided not to cancel everything I've ordered and went through the whole birthday celebration as planned. It was almost perfect, except we were broken up. The reason I didn't cancel it was to show him how much he doesn't deserve me. I treated him nicely, with respect, for his birthday. 2 things that he didn't give me. Before all the food came, he told me that I didn't have to do it. That we could just cancel everything. I said no because we already paid for it. But the real reason was that I just wanted him to see what he lost. A girlfriend who cares about him and would do everything to make him happy. At night, his mom called him and he told his mom about the little celebration I've arranged for him. His mom said, "I am so happy that you have Sarah, not my real name, there with you, you are so lucky to have her." That's when he broke down crying. He realized what he had lost. And for what? 4 nudes? To feel special? To try something different? That's when he said that cheating wasn't worth it. I just looked at him and walked away. He broke me, but he also destroyed himself in the process. It might take me a while to be able to trust again, but I know that I have done nothing wrong, and I gave our relationship everything I could.
This is exactly what I went through 2 days ago. Literally. Seeing this helps me see that I'm not the only person that can be faithful in a relationship. There are still people out there who just want to be happy. I'm sorry you had to go through this. Hopefully with time we can both move past this and find people who truly deserve our love and appreciate it. Stay strong.
Story 2. My wife and the coach. TLDR, I caught my wife having an affair with my son's football coach. I confronted her, we're now heading for divorce. My wife and I are 33, married 11 years. We live in a once rural area that is fast becoming a suburb to a medium-sized metro area. Our HS graduating class had a little over 200 kids, now approaching 500 grads. I grew up on a farm. When I was 6, my mother just never came home one day. So my dad raised me. I took on my farm duties. In other words, I worked hard. Eventually my dad quit farming, he leased his fields to other farmers. He took a factory job. He invested his lease proceeds into buying up more land. Through the Great Recession he acquired many properties. On one of these properties there was a house he gave to me to fix up and start a family. It's in a trust with his other property, but we pay all the bills. My wife grew up lower middle class. A great family that always treated me well. They moved to the area while we were in junior high. We dated all through HS and were married once I had a steady job. Before then I did everything to earn $1. Need to haul junk out of a barn, folks would call me. Need your house painted, I can do it. If you get what I mean. We have an 8-year-old son. She is Psalm. Now, I am a route driver for a large snack company. I am close to buying my route from the company. I have more than doubled the size by going into every mom and pop store, grocery and gas station and selling as much product as I can. I have a large area because the surrounding area is still rural. My plan is to finish buying the route, then I can buy another truck. The plan was to have the wife run the second truck. There's projected super center grocery/merchandise to be built in the next year in my area. If I own the route, it will be mine. If not, the company can split my route. So I need to finish buying the route. We have been married since a couple years out of HS. Our marriage hits some rocky spots, I think because I put in long hours. I try to be there but admittedly am not. We have had lots of fun and love our boy with every fiber of ourselves. He is the typical boy. He is now into sports. He played basketball in the winter, baseball this past spring and is now into flag football. So we hit a low spot relationship-wise in the spring. My wife and I talked about it and each made promises to do better. Late April through mid-June our sex life went off the charts. We could not get enough of each other. To be honest, I may have been getting too much because I was dog-tired but still ran my route. My son was playing ball. I never missed a game but I did not hit all his practices. With most youth sports the dads take an active role in the coaching or helping out. I just could not give that commitment. My wife stepped up and helped out when needed. The baseball coach, Ted, is an ex of a very good friend from HS, Mary. She was the smartest kid in school. She went on to college, that's where they met. They married and soon had a son who is also 8. Their marriage hit the skids. Mary moved back home 3 years ago to have help watching the boy, by her parents. Ted moved here 2 years ago to be close to their son and I think to win Mary back. The mid to end of June we sink back into our rut. We talk again in July, promise to recommit. We take a vacation. Still the relationship is bumpy. Mid-August comes around, the bedroom heats up again. Then cools after just a couple weeks. September hits and we are in a dead bedroom. I beg my wife to talk but she says nothing is wrong. My son starts playing flag football. He loves it. They practice a couple days a week and play on Saturday. I drop by a practice and see my wife and Ted with a clipboard running the kids through drills. There are a couple dads helping too. I had no idea she was helping. So I mention it when we get home. My son is excited and shouts out she's not helping, she's a coach. It seems when signing the son up she volunteered to be an assistant coach. I think it's great. This seems to consume a ton of time. The wife is constantly texting, some calls but generally when I am there it's texting. They go to Ted's place every day after school and he works his son and mine out. He is teaching them how to be better and it really shows as they are the 2 best players on the team. So their first game comes, I work in the morning and make it to the field for the game. The wife and Ted are side by side giving directions. Someone sets a chair down next to me. It's Mary. We watch the game. About halftime she asks if the wife and I are doing okay. I tell her sure. I look over at her and she is staring at me. So I ask what? She said her son came home after being at Ted's. It had been raining so there was no workout. They spent the afternoon playing video games. Her son went to the kitchen to get more juice and saw Ted and the wife kissing. He ran back to the game and told Mary that night at home what he saw. I get up at 4 a.m. every day to drive 45 minutes to the warehouse to get my truck. So Monday morning I got up at 3:30 a.m. to check her phone. She had changed the password. After a few tries I figured out what it was, as she uses like 4 or 5 different ones for everything. There I saw text after text. Some nudes. So I took screenshots of some. Usually I have one day that I spend in town. I sometimes would come home for lunch if I took one. Especially when there was a lot of sex going on. I got home and she was not there. I called her but she did not pick up. I drove by Ted's place and her car was there. I finished my route. She told me she was at the store. She was sorry she missed me. I told her I was just trying to surprise her. Not a big deal. The next week, on the same day, I again let her know I was coming home for lunch. I was parked down the way from Ted's. How she did not see my big old truck is beyond me. She came running out of Ted's. Got in her car and raced home. I followed slowly. When I arrived she was making me a sandwich. We had a nice conversation. Saturday, after the game, I took my son home, had him change and took him to my dad's. They were going to fish in the pond and if he wanted he could swim. I went home. Of course, the wife was not there. So I drove to Ted's. Her car was there. I called her. She was kind of annoyed, then I asked what she was doing at Ted's. It was just silence. Then talking over the game, I told her to put her clothes on and come home. She swore at me and hung up. When she finally did come home, I was sitting at the table. She again swore at me for accusing her of something. I asked that she sit down. She refuses, getting more agitated by the minute. I told her a little more forcefully to shut up and sit down. Let me say my piece. I had a folder which she asked what was in it. I told her to sit down so I can show her. I started pulling out screenshots of her texts. She went ballistic that I would snoop in her phone. I then pulled out the more incriminating texts. She tried to explain it away. Then I pulled the nudes out. She shut up. I told her we were done. I would give her until the following Sunday to be out. I was going to an attorney Monday. Take her clothes and personal stuff. We will figure everything out later. She just sobbed. She said how sorry she was. I just asked a question that I saw on an Reddit advised sub, what did you think would happen when I found out? She had no answer. I have stayed at my dad's since the weekend. I brought my son back on Sunday so he could catch his bus to school on Monday. I had explained to him Mom and Dad would not be living together anymore, but he would still live in his house. I got home tonight and all her stuff was gone. There was a note that said she would drop my son off after practice. We had agreed she would pick him up after school. She could stay until I got home where I would pick him up at her parents'. It's been a couple weeks so I thought I would update. I cannot cut her out of my life. We have a young son together. It hurts to see her. We have filed for the divorce. She will be served next week. I am not going to do anything to embarrass her, like serving her at a game, etc. I told her the papers are coming. She wanted some things from the house. My attorney said no. She can petition, I think that's the word he said, when she answers the court for certain items. Myself, there is not much I care for, so she probably can have of them. What she wanted was not her personal stuff like clothes and makeup. Many have asked what she is doing with herself now. She is still at her parents' house. My son goes there most days until I get home from work. I have been trying to finish up by 5 p.m. most days, not working the extras. My attorney is working with another to keep my business out of the proceedings. My dad has offered to buy my route and hire me as an employee if that's what it takes. I will have to pay her support. We will share custody. It's lonely at home after my son goes to bed, but I am dealing with it. I have a couple projects to keep me busy. I have lots of friends offering all kinds of help from babysitting to meals. Last Saturday at the game, most of the parents that came all clustered around me with their chairs instead of spreading out along the sidelines. I was very touched. We have only this week's game and playoffs, and then we are done. Basketball will be next. All the parents I have talked to will request Ted not be their child's coach. Including Mary. Many have asked about Mary. She has been my friend for so many years. Many have asked about ending up with her. First, the pain of separation really still hurts. I can't see myself doing anything other than adjusting to my new life and providing for my son. I mentioned that Mary was the smartest kid in our school. She is so far out of my league. I would only hold someone like that back. We are sharing the hurt. It's her ex that moved here to maybe reconcile.
You are sitting here romanticizing someone who has no respect for you. You have so much working on yourself to do. You need to learn how to love yourself enough to know she is trash and not a friend at all. If she truly was, she would have been the good person you think she is and broke it off before embarrassing you and your child. Please stop making her into someone she isn't.
Story 3. The day I caught my fiancé cheating 2 days before our wedding. I'm now 31, but this happened in 2014 when I was 26 and my ex-fiancé was 25, let's call her Barb. We met in college and dated for 3 years prior to our engagement, with a wedding date booked by the 4th year. Neither of our parents were well off financially, and she was attending grad school, so the financial responsibility fell on me, which totaled $20,000 that was paid in full 4 days prior to the wedding. Leading up to that nightmare of an evening, we had our typical mid-20s relationship issues with bouts of poor communication, excessive drinking on weekends, and an occasional fight over trivial bullshit. Aside from that, we had a great relationship and spent a ton of time together figuring out post-college life and planning for our future. As I said above, the wedding and reception venue cashed my check 4 days before the wedding, and the contract stated this was non-refundable. Over 120 guests were confirmed, a couple dozen from out of state, tuxes and bridesmaid dresses were fitted and paid, and everything was falling into place. Now let's get to the inevitable shitstorm of events that you're all interested in before I keep rambling. The night in question was a Friday evening in our new apartment that we'd moved into a few weeks prior, and we decided to have about a dozen friends over to pregame and head out to the bars in town. Included in this group of friends was my buddy whom I've known since kindergarten, we'll call him Ricky. Barb and I had spent a lot of time with Ricky over the last 3 years, and he was definitely one of her favorite, one of my pals, which is generally awesome when you're so gets along with people in your social circle. The night started at a local hookah lounge that was BYOB, so by the time we left there, a 1/5 of Jameson and 30 rack of Yangling were gone and everyone was buzzed. The next 3 hours were spent between 2 to 3 bars that resulted in the entire group devolving into a drunken, belligerent mess. Once the bars closed, most people went home with the exception of myself, Barb, Ricky, and another couple who came back to our apartment for a nightcap. Once back at our place, the couple only lasted another 20 minutes before calling it and making their way home, so I was left with Barb and friggin' Ricky. Earlier in the night at the hookah bar, I noticed Barb checking her phone more than usual, and simultaneously Ricky checking his phone after she would lock the screen. I almost put two and two together, but why would I worry about them planning anything shady 2 days before I was supposed to marry this girl? Back at my house, I was fairly sober and noticed all the booze was gone, so I was contemplating picking up a couple of six-packs from a local spot that stays open until 3 a.m. Barb and Ricky were definitely on the liquor and tanked, but there was no reason to suspect anything sketchy would occur if I ran out for 20 minutes. Once in my car and preparing to exit my apartment complex, I got a sinking feeling in my gut that something wasn't right, and it completely freaked me out. So, I called my best bud and he agreed to be picked up and join me on the beer run and accompany me back to the apartment. After grabbing some Bud Heavies and returning home, we walked up to the sliding glass door that led to my living room that had a sectional to the immediate right. We opened the door, took 2 steps inside the apartment, and my ex-fiancé was completely topless and mounted on Mr. Ricky banging tonsil deep down each other's throats. The amazing part of the situation was neither of them appeared to notice that my buddy and I were 10 feet away watching their sloppy, drunken escapades. After 7 to 10 seconds of attempting to comprehend the current situation, I lost it, dropped the booze, threw her backward off Ricky completely topless, and landed 2 hard right hooks to Ricky's eye and cheek while he was still laying on his back with the most terrified look on his face. To put things in perspective, I am 6 feet 220 inches lbs and have played hockey my entire life. He is 5 feet 6 inches 140 pounds and a runner. Immediately following the assault with my fist, Ricky started snoring, didn't know this was a thing, and was asleep for at least 5 minutes while I was losing my mind over the situation. Without thinking, I called her parents about 10 times until they woke up and demanded they come to pick up their cheating daughter immediately. Their house was only 5 minutes down the road, so they walked in shortly thereafter while I was laying into Barb about her unforgivable, disgusting decision. Her parents frantically walked into me screaming at Barb, Ricky asked out on the couch, and my buddy mediating the situation. The first thing I told everyone was the wedding was off. I demanded the ring back and said I'd rather lose $20,000 than spend the rest of my life with a cheating bitch. Her parents spent the next 20 minutes attempting to talk me out of it and occasionally defending Barb's actions, saying things like why can't you forgive her or isn't it too late to cancel the wedding? Meanwhile, Ricky woke up and the right side of his face had swollen to the size of a grapefruit and his left eye was completely shut. Kicking him out of the apartment was tough because he was too drunk to drive, so I called his brother that was 20 minutes away and spent that time laying into Barb, Ricky, and her parents. Surprisingly, I was able to stay level-headed enough to express my thoughts in such an extreme state of rage. The few times I've been this upset in the past, my brain felt like it was scrambled and I had a hard time condensing and forming my thoughts into logical statements. Not this time. By the time Ricky's brother picked him up and Barb's parents shuttled her home, I had systematically picked apart any objection, opinion, or plea for reconsideration expressed by everyone in the room. It felt really great. I'm not going to pretend the following months were easy and everything worked out in my favor. 2 months later, the pharma company I worked at decided to lay off my entire division. I had racked up thousands in credit card debt to pay for the wedding, unemployment haunted me for 5 months, and I was diagnosed with major depression. Life was messed up for a few years and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but now that I'm 31 things have settled down and I couldn't be happier.
I can't believe the parents tried to defend her. I think that's ridiculous. I hope you found someone better than her.
Yeah, my buddy that walked in on them with me actually started to get quite defensive when he heard both parents trying to talk me out of it. He jumped in without hesitation and defended me, so that was pretty deep. I found someone about a year later whom I dated for the next 4 years, but she wound up being an emotionally/verbally abusive workaholic who was severely disliked by my friends and family. I bailed on that relationship last June and haven't had any desire to re-enter the dating game the last 10 months. Wasting 8 years with 2 women is an exhausting experience. Happily single I shall remain. Story 4. In-laws trying to convince me to accept wife's infidelity. My wife, 28F, and I, 30M, have been happily married for 3 years. I thought we were perfectly fine and in love, but a few days ago, she dropped a bombshell on me. She confessed to having an affair, saying she still loves me but wants us to be in an open relationship. I was shattered and asked her to leave so I could process this. Fast forward to this morning, I got a visit from her parents, my in-laws. I've always had a good relationship with them and hoped they would back me up and help convince my wife that this wasn't fair to our marriage. Boy, was I in for a surprise. Her dad, a man I've always respected, started the conversation. He confessed to me that their marriage had been saved by agreeing to the same terms my wife was suggesting. They had entered into an open relationship years ago, and he said it had actually made their bond stronger. He told me that he wanted the same for us and that accepting this would be a sign of love and maturity. I was dumbfounded, still trying to process this when her mother chimed in. And her words, they were just brutal. She outright told me that I wasn't satisfying her daughter's needs and that I was inadequate. She said I was being selfish and unloving by refusing to accept the new arrangement. Guys, I felt emasculated, betrayed, and confused. This isn't what I signed up for when I said, I do. I love my wife, but I can't just blindly accept infidelity. This isn't a lifestyle that I want, and it feels like an unfair and sudden burden that's been thrust upon me. I feel like my world has been turned upside down, and I'm being asked to celebrate it as if it's some great epiphany. Update. Brace yourselves for another unexpected twist. It involves my mother, and it's not pretty. Today, I got a surprise visit from my mother, accompanied by my mother-in-law. They walked in, and I could feel an ominous atmosphere settle. My mother, usually a jovial and loving woman, had a stern expression. "Son," she began, her tone firm yet gentle. "We've been discussing your situation." "Yeah, I've noticed," I replied, crossing my arms. "What's your take, Mom?" She shared a glance with my mother-in-law, then sighed. "I believe it might be best if you considered the arrangement your wife is suggesting." I was stunned. "You're on their side?" "Why?" "Well," she paused, "I've always been concerned that maybe you wouldn't be able to satisfy your wife due to your physical inadequacy." My mouth fell open. Here was my mother, the woman who raised me, echoing my mother-in-law's cruel words. I felt a rush of betrayal, sadness, and embarrassment. I asked them both to leave, needing some time alone. Feeling like my world was spinning, I called my father. We weren't the closest, but he'd always been straightforward and honest with me. I quickly explained the situation. "Jesus," he grunted over the phone, "your mother said that?" "I can't believe it, actually, I can." His words took me by surprise. "What do you mean, Dad?" "I'm not shocked she's supporting this. Your mother, she wasn't the most faithful wife herself. It's a big part of why we got divorced when you moved out." The revelations didn't stop. I felt like I was in a terrible dream. "We need to talk, son," he continued. "Let's get together, meet with a lawyer, and figure out how to handle this." So, that's the next step. My dad and I are scheduled to meet with a lawyer. I'm scared, hurt, and utterly confused. Update 2. As I mentioned in my previous post, my father and I plan to meet with a lawyer to discuss the situation. We had the meeting today, and here's what went down. I won't lie, walking into that law office felt overwhelming. But having my father beside me was a comfort. We explained everything to the lawyer, from my wife's desire for an open marriage to the insensitivity of my in-laws and even my own mother's hurtful words. The lawyer, a composed and stern woman, listened attentively. She explained that while the legal landscape around open marriages was complex, there were certain things I needed to be clear about. Firstly, she emphasized that my consent was critical. Regardless of what anyone else says, you have the right to decide what you are comfortable with in your relationship, she stated firmly. Secondly, she made it clear that if we decided to divorce, my wife's infidelity could impact the outcome, depending on our state laws. She also touched upon asset division, alimony, and how any future infidelity could potentially affect these things. Finally, she suggested we consider couples therapy before making any drastic decisions. This was not a legal but a personal suggestion. She explained that therapy could provide a safe and mediated space for my wife and me to express our feelings and thoughts, and perhaps help us find a resolution. However, I'm afraid it's far too late for couples therapy. I spoke with my wife an hour ago over the phone and her response was, well, exactly what you'd expect. Therapy won't change anything, she said coldly. I love you, but this is non-negotiable for me. You either accept it, or it happens without your approval. I was dumbstruck. The woman I had loved and married was standing in front of me, giving me an ultimatum that shook me to my core. In that moment, I felt something in me snap. With a heavy heart, I asked her for a divorce. To that, she just smirked and said, I'm not signing any divorce papers. We said for better or for worse, remember? I couldn't bear it any longer. I packed a bag and left our home, feeling more lost than I ever have in my life. I decided to move in temporarily with my father. The next twist in this saga? My mother showed up at my father's doorstep, berating him for supporting me and encouraging my stubbornness. She insisted that I should be more understanding and flexible in my marriage. That was the final straw. My patience and goodwill, already hanging by a thread, snapped completely. I confronted her and called her out for her hypocrisy and infidelity. You're nothing but a cheating whore, I spat out, the pent-up anger and betrayal pouring out. You have no right to preach about understanding and flexibility. She left in a huff, clearly shaken. I've never spoken to her like that before, but in that moment, it felt justified. So, here I am, living with my dad, unsure of my next step. My wife is refusing to divorce, my mother is unsupportive, and my world has been turned upside down. But I'm not giving up. I'm going to fight for my dignity, for my rights, and for my peace of mind. I'll update you as things progress. In the meantime, any advice or words of encouragement would be much appreciated.
Your wife doesn't have to consent to a divorce, I don't think. Especially with any evidence of infidelity, you should be able to get a divorce regardless of her decision. She sounds like a terrible woman, and your mother and her mother are also terrible. Also, the in-laws are terrible people. You deserve better. Honestly, I would probably have lost my shit on my mother and said exactly what you said. She not only was unfaithful but told you to accept it from your wife. She isn't a mother, and she isn't a good woman. You deserve better, and you dad deserved better. Honestly, after her comments about you, just cut her out of your life. Talk to the lawyer and see what you can do to get the divorce to move forward and document everything that your wife does.